We are approaching the NFL playoffs, and with most of the 2025 NFL regular season having been played, no matter who you are a fan of, I think there is one thing we can all agree on, and it's that the playoffs this year are extremely wide open. And between the two conferences, I think the AFC is more wide open than the NFC. And in today's video, we're going to break down teams' biggest strengths, weaknesses, and what could propel them to getting to Super Bowl 60, and what could also prevent them from getting to Super Bowl 60. And what can be really unfortunate for NFL teams is you can have a great regular season like the Vikings or Lions did last year, and you can make a few mistakes in a playoff game, and the season you spent getting excited about for the past several months is over in a span of 3 hours. And in today's video, we're going to break down why the AFC is so wide open and who actually has the best chance of getting to the Super Bowl this year. I also encourage you to comment below who you think is going to the Super Bowl this year, and before we start, if you could like the video, a football will appear when you do, and is very much appreciated and helps tremendously with the YouTube algorithm. And with those prefaces out of the way, let's begin. And we are starting today's video by breaking down the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jags are currently 9-4 and sit atop the AFC South, and there is a good chance they win the AFC South. Based on their final 4 games, the idea is that the Jags division comes down to the Week 16 game against the Broncos and the Texans winning out. And the Texans' most difficult game in the final 4 is at the Chargers for reference. So if in this scenario the Jags win the AFC South, they would be the 3 seed, presumably behind Denver and New England. And I think the case for Jacksonville is very much a two-sided coin. You can talk yourself into Anthony Campanelli's defense stepping up and having a good run against other AFC teams, and for Josh Hines-Allen and Devin Lloyd to continue having the years they're having and to continue to be a problem for opposing teams in January. This team ranks 2nd in turnovers forced, and they're also 5th in EPA per play defensively. And as everyone knows, the NFL is the ultimate what have you done for me lately league, and the Jags defense recently has been cooking. They've allowed 19 points or less in 3 of their last 4 games, and technically in the game against Arizona, they didn't allow a true 24 points as the Cardinals had a defensive touchdown. And that brings me to the point of why Jacksonville can also be a first-round exit, and that's the up and down play of Trevor Lawrence. But in fairness to Trevor Lawrence, he's played great recently. There were a few wow throws from the Colts game that should be getting a lot more recognition nationally than I've seen, and specifically the play where he rolled out to the backside with a safety chasing him down and completed a pass for a gain of 26 yards against his body. The Jags to me are a very sneaky team, and there's legitimate reason to buy in with this team. And I'm also not ready to give up on Brian Thomas Jr., especially considering what he did last year as a rookie. This is a franchise that has a very bright future, and the tone can be set for the Liam Cohen era this January. Now, with the Houston Texans, obviously we know how good their defense is, and it's shown every single week. They have who I believe is the best edge duo in football in Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson, and they're also number 1 in several major categories defensively, such as points allowed, yards allowed, total EPA per play, and they're also 4th in turnovers forced. And we saw firsthand what this team can do to a team in January last year when they intercepted Justin Herbert 4 times in 1 game. And even when this team was 0-3, the biggest thing I hammered home was if they can somehow just get to the postseason, they're going to be a very difficult team to beat, as in the first 3 games of the year, they had allowed just 51 total points. But where my biggest concern undoubtedly lies with this team is the offense, and as we know, winning cures everything, and even though they most recently beat the Chiefs, I think there is a fair amount of concern with this offense. The Chiefs, of course, went for it on 4th down with 10 minutes to play in a tie game and didn't get it, and Houston scored on a short field that started on Kansas City's 31-yard line. They also kicked a field goal after a Patrick Mahomes interception later in the 4th quarter, but other than those 2 drives, which were already very short fields, the Texans had 6 drives in the second half, all of which were punts, and 5 of which were 3-and-outs. I think this team will finish with at least 11 wins, if not 12, but my biggest concern with this team is the complete lack of run game and the fact they struggle pretty regularly to put up points offensively. It's not a coincidence they're 26th in yards per carry, and it's not a coincidence Texans fans are as frustrated as they are with offensive coordinator Nick Caley. And ultimately, I worry greatly about this team's offensive line when it comes hell or high water. And at this point, stranger things have happened, but I would put this team around a divisional round exit. The AFC North is up, and within the AFC North, we are going to discuss just the Ravens and Steelers, as technically the Bengals are still mathematically alive, but I don't think they're going to go to the postseason, and that concept also applies to the Colts within the AFC South, and that's why we didn't discuss them. Now, Philip Rivers has been signed to the practice squad, and if a 44-year-old Philip Rivers goes out and plays against the Seahawks and Texans defense in 2025, good luck, and I mean that the best way. Good luck, Philip. But pertaining to the 2025 Baltimore Ravens, they are currently 6-7 after they lost 27-22 to the Pittsburgh Steelers in Week 14. That was a very tough loss on several fronts. The refs even came out after the game and said that they blew a call and that the Travis Jones call specifically should have never happened, and that cost the Ravens 4 points. But even if the Ravens win that game, even if they, have a couple of things go differently, they're 7-6, the Steelers are now 6-7. I don't think much changes for the Baltimore Ravens pertaining to the Super Bowl outlook because this is a very flawed roster. Now, admittedly, I was doing this a lot earlier in the year, especially when Lamar Jackson was out, and whenever a team's quarterback is out, whether it was Lamar, Joe Burrow, Josh, Mahomes, you get the point. Those teams' seasons are going to be altered at that point. But even when Lamar was coming back, when they were 1-5, and they still weren't looking great offensively, I was willing to dismiss it because, hey, we still have 2+ months before the postseason, and they can have those months to really get dialed in, but this is who the 2025 Ravens are. They are not a great team, and Ravens fans, believe me, I feel for you guys with the interior offensive line problems, and Daniel Falele and Andrew Voorhees are not great players at their respective positions. So, inevitably, when you have offensive line problems in December, heading into January, inevitably, I think that is going to limit what you're going to be able to do, and also within this, the receiving core is not good, and right now, if I had to ask you who you think the second leading receiver on the Ravens is, aside from Zay Flowers, of course, you'd probably say Mark Andrews, and you'd be right. But Mark Andrews has just 341 receiving yards on the year. Now, I know that Cooper Rush started a couple of games earlier in the season, and obviously, Cooper Rush wasn't good in those games, and in one of those games he played the Texans defense, and you can take a wild guess as to how that game played out. The Texans won 44-10, and they feasted on a backup quarterback, but the point is, for Mark Andrews, who is a Pro Bowl tight end, to be second on the team in the middle of December with 341 receiving yards, that is a problem no matter how you slice it. And like we just mentioned, the interior offensive line also has not been good, and that is also a problem because if the Eagles proved anything last year, which is a point I will continue to hammer home, it's that big boys win rings. And also on the other side of the football, whether you know this or not, the current Ravens sack leader is rookie Mike Green, and if you had to take a second, I would encourage you to guess how many sacks he has. It's 2.5. And again, we are in the middle of December, and that is a problem. So for a team that has a lot of problems offensively, specifically along the interior offensive line where pressure is regularly in Lamar's face, and for a team that cannot consistently get after the quarterback, that, by the way, also has a very difficult final 4 games of the year as they play at Cincinnati, at Green Bay, and at Pittsburgh in 3 of their final 4 games, with the only home game in there being against the Patriots, I don't think the Ravens season is going to last that much longer, unfortunately. Maybe they win a wild card game if they even get into the postseason, which at this point I would say is a bit of a long shot, but I would say at the absolute most, the 2025 Ravens are a divisional round exit if they even get into the postseason. Now, the current leader of the AFC North is up in the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they're 7-6 on the year. They have a more favorable schedule to get to the postseason than the Ravens, and if I had to pick an AFC North winner at this point, I would say it's going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers. And based on the Ravens' final couple of games of the year, I'm going to be honest, I think there is a real scenario where the Steelers can rest their starters in Week 18 because they have the 4 seed locked up and they're not going to be able to improve to the 3 seed, largely because I think the Jags and Texans will both finish with north of 11 wins, and I don't think the Steelers will be in a position to be able to get to the 3 seed. But outside of that, I have a lot of questions about the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I feel like it's been the same message in 2025 that it's been for the past couple of years, just give or take a couple of variables. And with the Pittsburgh Steelers over the past few years, I really feel like it's giving a pig a different color of lipstick. This is a very frustrating team because, to me, in a lot of ways, they are perpetually average. I mean, maybe slightly above average, if you will, but what I would say is this, or what I would ask is this. What are the 2025 Pittsburgh Steelers great at? They are currently second in the NFL in turnovers forced, as they've forced 23 turnovers in the first 14 weeks of the season, but 11 of those 23 turnovers came in 2 games. They forced 5 turnovers against the Patriots in a win, and they forced 6 turnovers against the Colts in a win. But I would also ask this question pertaining to their Super Bowl chances this year. Do you think they are going to force an average of 5.5 turnovers in 4 straight postseason games to win the Super Bowl and to secure the franchise's 7th Super Bowl? I personally don't, and I don't think that should be a hot take. They are also 15th in EPA per pass, and they're 18th in rushing EPA, and they're also 27th in yards offensively, and not only that, they are 28th in average yards per carry. This is a team, to me, that is I mean, maybe at most a divisional round exit. Maybe they have one good wild card round playoff game, but I would also say that there is, unfortunately, and Steelers fans, I do sympathize with you guys, there's a reason this team hasn't won a playoff game in going close to a decade. And whether you know this or not, Steelers fans, please, I apologize for this, so skip ahead 10 seconds, but TJ Watt has also never won a playoff game. That's how long that this streak has been going on. I don't think this team is going to the Super Bowl. I don't know how many people that do, in all seriousness, that actually think the Steelers have a shot. And again, I do feel bad for the fans because this is a team that is, I mean, they have to create a lot of turnovers to win games. And we've seen that this year, whether it was the Bengals game in which they had not one but 2 defensive touchdowns, or like we mentioned, the Patriots game in which they forced 5 turnovers, or the Colts game in which they forced 6 turnovers. And I don't think this team is going to be anything more than a division round exit, and even that to me is a little lofty with where this team currently is. The biggest thing I want to hammer home with the Pittsburgh Steelers is I would love to be proven wrong about this team, and I will admit that I think this year is a lot more open than we've had in years past, but this team to me is a very flawed team, and like I said, I think at most they will be a divisional round exit. The Broncos are up, and at the time of this video release, they are 11-2 and have won 10 games in a row. And during this stretch, they beat teams like the Eagles at the Link, the Texans in Houston, and beat the Cowboys and Chiefs both at home. Now, the one thing you should know if you already don't know about the 2025 Broncos defense is this team sacks the opposing quarterback a lot, and they currently have 4 players with 5.5 or more sacks and 11 players with 2 or more sacks, and right now they have 55 sacks in the year as a defense and are just 17 away from the 1984 Bears defense for having the most sacks in a season, as they had 72. Now, for as much as I love Nick Bonito and have for several years, and for how good the defense is at getting after the quarterback, I feel like even if you are a Broncos fan, you have to be a little nervous or have concerns about the offense in the back of your mind, and for good reason. They're 14th in points per game, and I would say really outside of the Texans, based on the teams we discuss in today's video, the Broncos offense concerns me the most. Now, having said that, there are people that really since the Broncos started winning games that have been screaming from the rooftops about how they're destined to be a first round exit and how they see it coming from a million miles away. And there is a real scenario where that happens, but I think this team will win at least one playoff game. Now, I will be honest about the Broncos. If they get matched up against Buffalo in the wild card round in a 2-7 seeding game, then I would be very concerned about the Broncos' playoff chances at that point. And to me, that is the worst match Denver can have in the first round. But with how shaky every other team has been throughout the 2025 season, there's no reason Denver can't make it to at least the AFC Championship game, if not the Super Bowl. But for the purpose of this video, right now I think Denver's ceiling is an AFC Championship game loss. And the reason for that is I have real questions about the offensive playmakers and which team shows up every week. Now, for transparency, I don't think the Chiefs are making the postseason, so this will be their only mention, and that's also why they're not getting a feature in today's video. But for the Chargers, they are coming off of a 22-19 overtime win against the Eagles, and they've won 5 of their last 6 games. But what worries me with the Chargers is, well, if you watch the Eagles game, then this should come as no surprise, but it's the offensive line. Justin Herbert is currently the 3rd highest sack quarterback in the league behind Geno Smith and Cam Ward, and there's a reason for that. Not having 2 Pro Bowl tackles healthy is going to make a big difference over the course of a season. And sure, you can get away with it for a game or two, but does anyone wholeheartedly believe the Chargers are going to be able to make a run with the current offensive line they have? Because I certainly don't. And obviously Justin Herbert did not play good in the playoff game last year against the Texans, and while I don't think he'll have another 4-interception playoff game, I do worry that if they play a team with a good pass rush, it'll be a lot of hurried reads and muddy pockets and a lot of happy feet within the pocket, which could lead to turnovers with this season on the line. The best case scenario for this team would be to play the Steelers again and to be able to get after Aaron Rodgers the way they did the first time around, but what also worries me about the Chargers at this point is they even have a playoff schedule ahead of them before the playoffs start. They have 3 road games in their final 4 as they play at Kansas City, at Dallas, home against Houston, and at Denver. And with a team that already has a lot of questions around the offensive line, I too have questions, especially because if the 2024 Philadelphia Eagles proved anything, it's that big boys win rings. And it's been a very unfortunate year for the Chargers, and I don't think a miracle is going to happen for this team down the stretch of the 25 season. At the absolute most, I think they're a divisional round exit, but if I had to choose right this second, I think they'll lose in the wild card round. The New England Patriots are up, and right now they're an 11-2 football team riding a 10-game win streak with a hotshot 23-year-old quarterback by the name of Drake May. And with the success the Patriots have had, obviously combined with the success they had during the Tom Brady and Bill Belichick era, well, a lot of people have tried to bring the Patriots down, and what they'll do is they will post a screenshot of from tankathon.com with the current top 10 draft picks order in the 2026 draft, and then ask the question, is that the top 10 draft pick order, or is that the 2025 New England Patriots schedule? Now, what I will say is the Patriots can't control who they play. They can only play who's in front of them, and even within this 10-game win streak, they beat the Panthers by 29 points. They went into Buffalo and beat the Bills, and they also went down to Tampa and beat the Bucs. And they are an 11-2 football team, and I would be pretty surprised if this team doesn't win the AFC East at the moment. And with Drake May specifically, I don't think he's going to win the MVP this year, but I would be pretty surprised, based on the level that he's playing at 23 years old, if he doesn't win an MVP over the course of his career, maybe even 2 MVPs. I mean, he is that good of a player, and the flashes that he's shown is extremely promising for not only his future, but of course the Patriots' future as well. Now, with the Patriots, like we have discussed with every other team in today's video, we have to point out the flaws of this team and what could prevent them from getting to play in San Francisco in Super Bowl 60. Now, my biggest concern with the Patriots as we enter January is Drake May's inability to throw for 300 yards in a game. If you're that good, I wouldn't think throwing for 300 yards in a game is that difficult. But what really concerns me with the Patriots is the inability to consistently run the football. They're 27th in yards per attempt and 29th in EPA per rush, and I would imagine what opposing teams would do is basically to sell out against the pass. Hey, we know that Drake May is a really good quarterback. None of us would be surprised if he wins an MVP in the future, so what we are going to do is force you to beat us with a run, and I don't have a lot of confidence in New England's ability to be able to do that, especially over the course of a 60-minute game, where opposing teams know what your strengths and weaknesses are, and it's only going to be amplified in January, and that is the biggest thing that concerns me, especially if you play against a team like the Broncos, who can basically say, hey, Pat Surtain, Go work on Stephon Diggs the entire day, take him out of the game, and we'll force Kayshon Boutte and Matt Collins and Hunter Henry to beat us. And at that point, that would be extremely disadvantageous for the Patriots, and that is the biggest part that worries me for New England. Now, what I will say is the Patriots are one of only 5 teams in the NFL to have 3 guys with 40 or more pressures, and I do want to credit the Patriots for getting the most out of Harold Landry and Caleb Von Chason this year from a pressure standpoint, as I didn't think the Harold Landry signing was all that good, and I certainly wasn't expecting this much out of Caleb Von Chason. So if they can get after the quarterback, they can pressure the quarterback, force them into bad decisions, and create a couple of turnovers, then anything can happen. What I will say about the 2025 AFC playoffs this year is I think there's going to be a lot more low-scoring games because I don't trust a lot of offenses this year the way that we have in years past. I think there will be a lot of 17-14, 20-17 type games where the over-under for each game is going to be under 40 total points simply because I don't trust offenses the way that we have in years past. So if you can force the opposing offense into a couple of bad situations or create a couple of turnovers, then the opportunity to advance to the next round is going to be there for not just the Patriots, but for every other team, because all you have to do is play 4 quarters and survive and advance. I know that may sound obvious, but there's a lot of inexperience at the quarterback position within the postseason, and that's what I'm really looking forward to in January, is to see how each quarterback and how each team plays ultimately when it matters with the season on the line. And what I think is really exciting about the 2025 playoffs is due in some part to the parity that the Chiefs aren't in the postseason this year, because even when the Chiefs are in the playoffs, it's very much, hey, you got to go through Kansas City. The playoffs don't get serious until you beat Kansas City, and there was a reason last year that either the NFL or the Chiefs tweeted a picture of Patrick Mahomes and his family, and it said, time for the Mahomes family yearly Super Bowl picture, which is a downright insane post to be able to send because of the fact that they had been to the Super Bowl 5 times in the past 6 years. But when you have teams like Jacksonville, Denver, Houston, New England, I can't wait for the postseason this year. But that leads us to a team that, honestly, I've said this before, that I don't think I would bet on many teams to be able to go from the wild card round to the Super Bowl, but I really feel like you can talk yourself into the Buffalo Bills going to the Super Bowl this year for a couple of reasons. Now, I have said in previous weeks that, hey, I think the Bills season in some ways is over because of the fact that they would have to win 3 straight road playoff games, but you can sit back and legitimately talk yourself into it for a couple of reasons. Now, one of those reasons is, of course, Josh Allen. Another big one to me is, of course, James Cook and the Bills' ability to run the football and how that translates to January. But, like we have pointed out with every team, I think you have to discuss the Bills' flaws, and one of those big flaws is their ability to stop the run against other great teams. Now, why this really plays into the Bills' favor pertaining to the AFC is, Are there any great teams in the AFC that can legitimately run the football that Buffalo will have to go through on their way to the Super Bowl? New England, like we said, is 29th in rushing EPA per play. Denver is not a bad team at running the football, but they're certainly not one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the NFL. Jacksonville can be very hit or miss with that, and Houston, well, their offense has a lot of problems as well. So when you look at the teams that that Buffalo would have to go through to get to the Super Bowl, guys, you can legitimately talk yourself into Buffalo going this year, and I don't think it's the craziest thing in the world. Now, one other thing that really concerns me with the Bills is their complete lack of receiving depth or high-end number 1 receiver, and I think that has to be noted. But one thing that they've been doing more recently is to get the tight ends involved both in the run-blocking game and the receiving game. And if you are a fan of Jacksonville or Houston or New England or Denver or Baltimore or Pittsburgh or whoever that would have Buffalo going into your stadium at any point in the playoffs, are you sitting there comfortably saying, hey, you know what, we'll be good, we're not worried about the Bills because we won our division and we'll take care of business? No, the Bills are a legit problem, and anytime you have Josh Allen as the opposing quarterback coming into your stadium with the season on the line, there's not a lot of times where I'm going to say, hey, you know what, I am completely betting against Josh Allen, I don't think the Bills are going to win this game. And that's in some reason as to why I don't think it's the craziest reason as to think that the Bills can go from a wild card team all the way to the Super Bowl. Now, at this point, with who I would pick to win the AFC, I think it would be New England or Buffalo, and if I had to choose right now, I would say New England, but I don't think it's the craziest thing to think that the Bills can run the table. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe, as a football will appear when you do, and is very much appreciated. Please comment below who you think is going to the Super Bowl from the AFC, and until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.